burying an emotion, you're training yourself to forget. So it makes sense that your body will later start to forget because you trained yourself to do so. It is linked to an increased risk of cognitive decline. Musical training physically alters the brain structure, improving communication between the brain's hemispheres. Hey everyone, how are you? So today we're going to talk about music and memory. This is definitely a health component of learning music. What happens when you learn a musical instrument? I just want you to know that, learning an instrument, and as far as this channel, learning guitar, you're not just learning an instrument, okay? It's not just doing something for fun. It goes way beyond that, okay? Really anything that you do, there's more to what you're doing, okay? So as far as it pertains to learning a musical instrument, learning music as well, your brain is just very active in that, okay? I looked up a few things, to help to illustrate and help me to articulate even what I've noticed in my own life. Memory is something that is greatly triggered while you're learning music. And especially if you're doing music, if you're playing music on a weekly basis and you're constantly learning songs. Similar things can happen when you're just learning music as like for leisure, as a hobby. You're not playing for nobody, you're not getting paid or anything like that, but they're just really beneficial things that happen as a result. Now let's talk about these different parts of the brain, okay? The hippocampus, amygdala, prefrontal cortex, cerebellum, neocortex. All right, the hippocampus is the primary structure for turning short-term memories into long-term ones. Other key areas process specific types of memory. So located in the temporal lobe, it acts as an index. This is right now we're talking about the hippocampus, organizing and routing new episodic and factual memories to the rest of the brain. And that's the main function of the hippocampus. And I'm not looking at any additional sources right now, but I'm just making sure that what I'm looking is actually consistent with the more broader research that I've done. The amygdala assigns emotional significance to memories, particularly those associated with fear and reward. Okay, amygdala, like you can say that, successes and, sometimes failures, maybe the amygdala has a lot to do with that, those things being triggered or stimulated. And a lot of times when we're learning an instrument, those little victories that we experience, and it kind of tells us that we can keep going or that we need to quit or something like that. Those are things to kind of, stay aware of. Okay. But a lot of times we can set ourselves up for success to avoid feeling like a failure, basically. Prefrontal cortex manages short-term working memory and helps recall specific semantic tasks. Cerebellum controls procedural or motor memories such as riding a bike or playing an instrument. I'm wondering if this part has to do with some of the fine motor skills that is specific to, like selecting specific frets and things like that. Fine motor skills are definitely utilized with that. So I'm wondering if the cerebellum actually has something to do with that. Neocortex, the outer layer of the brain where long-term memories are permanently stored. So those are just a few parts of the brain that actually are stimulated. Even though the entire brain is stimulated, basically a lot of things are happening all at once. So after I looked up this particular part in my research, it led me to think about how learning music affects the brain and just the different parts, just all of what happens, okay? Because I've seen several studies on the brain and how music affects the brain, but I just decided to look this stuff up on my own. One thing about me, maybe this is a byproduct of learning music, I forget very little. And I'm not saying I'm like not a tape recorder. I'm not saying that I remember every single thing that happens like event to event throughout each day, but I can recall quite a bit and all the details. and a lot of times people say, dang, because if you remember that was like a long time ago. And, how could you remember that? I don't really know what to tell you as far as that. But what I can say is, I started learning instruments at a very young age. And maybe that stimulated some parts of my thinking that helps me to recall things. Not only recall things, but to feel safe to recall things. I also did some minor research where, traumatic things happen and, people have the ability to try to suppress certain things that happen, like certain events that trigger negative emotions, and how that could be harmful. Now we naturally want to protect ourselves from negative events, but it could actually cause harm to our brains and actually trigger dementia. Not totally, but I want to read about that a little bit later. It's not the primary reason for dementia, but let's just read a little bit more. So it says, learning music acts as a whole brain workout. So think, when people mention, I'm more left brained and I'm more right brained. I'm like, okay, typically musicians, people who learn music, practice music, learn musical instruments, they tap into both sides of the brain. Okay. So regardless of which one is dominant, I like to think of it as certain tasks uses certain sides of the brain. Okay. I don't think of a person being left brain or right brain. It's just certain tasks might require the left and certain tasks may require the right. And you can do some tasks that require the whole brain. Okay. So sometimes we get into the jargon and the terminology and the phrases, and we classify ourselves as right brain or left brain, even though there may be some truth in that. I look at music as something that it brings it all together, and it helps to, balance things out in a way, and there are many transferable elements as a result of learning music. It strengthens memory, learning music. It strengthens memory, and learning musical instruments strengthens memory, accelerates language processing, and builds creative problem solving skills. And by demanding the simultaneous processing of auditory, visual, and motor information, musical training physically alters the brain structure, improving communication between the brain's hemispheres. All right. So I think I want to stop right there on that particular page. I don't want to, it's kind of a lot to read, and I don't want to get into that. I mean, I'll maybe read this part. It says, enhanced hemispheric communication. Playing music requires the use of fine motor skills. That I actually just mentioned that. I didn't even know this said that. Alongside auditory and mathematical processing. This increases the volume and activity of the corpus callosum, the bridge between the left and right brain hemispheres, allowing messages to travel faster. Okay, so that's just one of the things that I'll mention on that list. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next thing that I was actually researching, which has to do with dementia. And I'm really intrigued by this particular subject, but I'm gonna make it as quick as I can make it. Now, some of this research is National Institutes of Health, Science Daily, and the Fisher Center of Alzheimer's Research Foundation. Those are some of my sources. People who learn an instrument and the effects on dementia, in some senses, the preventative effects. So learning or playing a musical instrument is a powerful modifiable activity that can strengthen cognitive reserve. Research shows that active musical engagement later in life can lower the risk of dementia by over 30%, protect the brain from structural decline, and improve emotional well-being. This part says dementia risk reduction. Studies from what I just mentioned, National Institutes of Health, note that older adults who play an instrument regularly have a significantly lower likelihood to develop dementia or cognitive impairment. Okay, so it goes way beyond just learning guitar, piano, or whatever. You're actually protecting yourself by allowing your brain to go through such, if you want to call it rigor, whatever, enjoyment, however you want to look at it. The next bullet point mentions preserving memory. According to research, this is actually Science Daily, older adults in their 70s who learn and practice an instrument maintain their verbal working memory and show less age-related brain shrinkage, especially in the cerebellum, compared to those who do not. All right, and I'm going to stop there on that part. There are other points that actually are listed by the Fisher Center of Alzheimer's Research Foundation. I'm not going to get into that, but maybe I can mention this part. So the Fisher Center for Alzheimer's Research Foundation indicates that even in patients already diagnosed with dementia, active music making can boost memory, reduce anxiety, and vastly improve quality of life. So I mean, I'll stay there on that part. There's this word. Oh, I asked this question, and then I did some research on this as well, because I noticed that people who suppress emotions, and I'm talking about real bad, that's going to have a negative long-term effect. This is one of the reasons why having a therapist is extremely important, because you have to talk those things out. Okay, when you're learning an instrument, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to suppress emotions, and I would not encourage anyone to practice or learn an instrument as a remedy to suppress emotions, where you can let it out in the music. But I would still encourage people to speak about the specific issue that's triggering the emotion. Okay, even though music can help with that, but I feel like if anything, the music is going to remind you of something, and it's going to cause you to have to address something. So I used to think that burying an emotion would actually cause later in life. It's like you're training your body, like you're training yourself to forget. So it makes sense that your body will later start to forget, because you trained yourself to do so. And that can cause anxiety, early on. I looked up some stuff, and what I saw was that burying or suppressing a thought or event or emotion does not directly cause dementia, but dementia is caused by underlying physical diseases in the brain, such as Alzheimer's or vascular disease. That's kind of the main thing that causes dementia, is actually pointed toward vascular disease. So, but not by psychological defense mechanisms. However, the habitual stress of suppressing emotions is linked to an increased risk of cognitive decline. So it can contribute. Suppressing your emotions, suppressing like certain events that happen in life, and maybe you never told anybody. And the thing is, our bodies and our brains are wired the way that they are for a reason, and we're supposed to do something with those things that we remember and the things that our memory recalls. We're supposed to do something with that, and not let it be just there, kind of occupying space. You got to do something with it, like qualify it some type of way. Maybe you can ask yourself, like, what did I learn from that particular event? Get something good out of it. As negative as it was, get something good out of it, so that you can have at least one, or maybe many, references in association to a particular event, so that you're not suppressing the emotion. You're not afraid of thinking about it, because it's not the main reason for causing dementia. Like it says, it is linked to an increased risk of cognitive decline. So if you're burying emotions and thoughts of certain events that happen throughout life, and you have vascular issues, you're really not in a good position at all. So, and for those of you who maybe you don't know what the word vascular, well, I'm just going to define vascular. It basically has to do with your veins and capillaries, but I'm going to look it up real quick. It says, the term vascular relates to the body's network of blood vessels, such as arteries, veins, and capillaries, that transport blood and lymph. In botany, it refers to the specialized tissues that circulate water and nutrients through plants. So that's as far as that is concerned. But it's mainly vascular related. Dementia is mainly vascular related, but music can help to greatly diminish your chances of getting it. But you still want to talk out your issues. You want to make peace with these different things that could really cause you a lot of harm later. Thankfully, we have music, but I can really testify that even though I have a tendency to remember a lot of things, what this can mean for me is that if a person treats me badly or poorly, not only do I remember the good things, I remember the bad things, and I remember them very vividly. So it basically transfers to other areas of your life. Your brain is already in the act of remembering a lot, okay? And not just passing by things, and it's just like, you know, we're just kind of aimlessly wandering. You know, musicians tend to pay close attention to things. So I'm one of those people. Now, if a person treats me poorly, it doesn't mean that I don't forgive them, and it does mean that. But if we bring the event back up, I can explain a lot of details. Not every single thing, but I can explain a lot of details that maybe a lot of people miss. I can tell you how I felt, and I can freely express all the things that I felt. I can remember everything that I felt. And basically my emotions and my thoughts are not stuck, you know, in that place to where I can't recall it back. Remember, the hippocampus is highly stimulated in the process of learning music or learning a musical instrument. Remember what I said earlier, it acts like an index. It's almost like you can pull it back up. You don't want to be put in a position to where, you know, you can't even recall what happened and it was right in front of your face. Okay, but the hippocampus, it acts like an index. It organizes and it routes new episodic and factual memories to the rest of the brain. That's just an example as far as, you know, that particular part of the brain. But all in all, I just wanted to mention some of the health benefits of learning an instrument. And of course, this channel, we focus on guitar, and how the brain affects creativity, and how learning an instrument will really get your imagination flowing, and you begin to create experiences and references where you can trust yourself, okay, to do it again. After you success at it once, you'll start to think, oh, wow, I could do that again, okay? And you want to build more experiences, or you want to build more experiences where you had some success, because you start to believe that about yourself. And I will actually record another video about the word belief. So I'll cut this video off on this particular subject, but I want to talk about belief and awareness, and how music actually impacts, or learning music actually impacts that, okay? And I just figured I would share, you know, so I'm definitely rambling, but hey, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Let me know your thoughts on this subject too. And yeah, so I'll check you on that. All right, peace.